Welcome everybody to our second seminar in Digital and Public Humanities organized by the Venice Center for Digital and Public Humanities, Foscari University at Venice. Thank you and welcome especially to today's speaker, Marta Severo, and thank you for all those familiar and unfamiliar names here on my screen. This seminar is being recorded, so be aware if you participate, this will be then published online on our YouTube channel. Materials, in case Marta will be able to share some materials or wants to share some materials, will be uploaded to our GitHub repository, and you get notice information about this from our social media channels on Twitter or Instagram. Thank you especially to Stefano Dallaglio and Deborah Paci for organizing this cycle of spring seminars, and Elisa Corot for supporting all the background work as for the dissemination and here the technical support. I think that's as much as for the announcement. There will be room for discussion after the presentation. You are invited to post questions as we go into the chat, and I can then after the presentation ask you to read or ask your question yourself, or I can read it for you. So that's all possible. Marta Severo is a full professor in Information Communication Sciences at the Université of Paris Nanterre, a junior member of the Institut Universitaire de France, and deputy director of the laboratory DISON IDF laboratory, so Ile-de-France-based expert unit for information science and digital communication. Since 2019, she has been a member of the scientific board of Open Edition, a consortium devoted to open access, providing platforms dedicated to electronic resources in the humanities and social sciences, books, journals, blog platform Hypothèse, and the events calendar Calendar. Her research activities and publications cover participatory and contributory online practices, representations of places through web data, social media analysis, and information visualization, with a focus especially on cultural heritage institutions and data. And that's also the topic of her talk today: cultural heritage, participation in platforms, theoretical and methodological challenges. Marta, the floor is yours. Thank you for coming. And we look forward to your presentation.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for this invitation and also for this introduction. I will share my screen. So let's try. Okay. I will put full. Yes. So, my research is, as been presented by Franz, my research interests are quite large. I'm very happy today to present you some recent research that I'm carrying out on participation and cultural heritage. And I'm especially happy to share this with you because I share in very different context. I hope that you can catch some elements sometimes, but you will see later why I put this introduction. Anyway, I will organize my presentation in three parts. First, I will explain why for me is interesting to study participation and cultural heritage today. Then I will propose you a theoretical framework that, in my view, is useful to understand this kind of phenomena. And then in the last part, I will very quickly, because I don't think I will have time to go in deeper. If you want, I can give you more details in the discussion on the methodological challenge that I have in implementing my theoretical framework. So just to just to provide some example to be sure that it's clear the phenomenon I want to speak about for everyone. Today, we speak about the participatory turn. We have different, I took some articles from newspaper to show how we speak about the role of the amateur in the cultural fields. This paper of The Guardian speaks about the platform where citizens can fill information about archaeological sites in Great Britain. This is another I talk today, some example from Italy. This article of La Repubblica is presenting another platform where people can has already uploaded more than 1,000 kilometers of pedestrian trails. And last one. Oh, sorry. This great example also of the extensive digital library, a quite recent case where the University Library of Modena provides some documents, and then if you have an account, you can annotate, you can build lists, you can share, you can consult lists, so you can increase the knowledge of the institution about these documents. So participation about cultural heritage is all today mailing this. And we are yes, another, and then I provide a last example. Is the sample that catch my attention like 2-3 years ago now. One Day One Soldier is a French platform. I will go back on this in the last part of my talk. In this case, a platform of the Ministry of Army, where a crowdsourcing platform where the ministry provide 1 million of file of soldiers dead during the First World War. And thanks to the contribution of amateurs, these 1.5 million files were annotated in less than 3 years. This is catch my attention. Why they were able to have so big participation? What worked in this case? Because if you, I don't know, you are at least familiar with this kind of platform, animating participation, have participant is a very big challenge. So why is interesting for me this topic? Because in my view, there is nothing new on participation in cultural heritage. Participation in cultural heritage exists since the 17th century, even before. I think that most people in the audience will be historians, so I will not teach you this. But it's important to know that in other fields, like my field, in digital communication, we tend to study digital participation in the cultural field as something completely new. And my point is that if we try to rebuild the link between what already happened in the last centuries about participation with what is happening today, this we can help us to understand this phenomenon and to have also a methodological framework for studying it. So for this reason, I will present you 5 properties that identify for the amateur that in my view are valid for the amateur in the past as the amateur today, as the digital amateur. So what is changing is surely the context, is the digital environment, the devices, but there are some behaviors that are really the same, and they can, the fact to study our amateur behaving several years ago can help to understand how they are behaving today. So the first, okay, I will go up. The first property is a kind of for relationships, let's say. The first point is the relationship with the institution. No, if we take the example of the Royal Academy in France or UK, also the Academy of Arcadia in Italy, amateurs are strictly related to the royal system. They are identified by the royal system, and they have the relationship in the royal spaces. So there is the opposition between the institution and amateurs that we can we tend to highlight today is not true. The amateurs was related to the institution as is related today, I will show later. The second point is the relationship with the knowledge. When the studies on the amateurs tend to highlight the passion, like something that is innate, something that is spontaneous. This is true, but there is also a strict relation with the knowledge. Amateurs in the time I study, especially the French context, are people that study a lot. They are looking for archive documents, are exchanging documents, are teaching to each other, are traveling the Grand Tour, not to learn from other exchange knowledge. I will be quite quick in this part, not just introduction. The third point is the relationship with the artistic practice. The most important amateurs in the 17th and 18th centuries are also practicing drawings or engraving. There are some kind of competition between them because people are not able to distinguish what is made by an artist and by an amateur. So there is really an effort in practicing drawing or engraving at the point to have the same level of an artist. So, yeah. The fourth point is the relationship with the others. Even if we tend to identify the amateur as a solitary person related to his passion, is a very personal, individual dimension, actually is a very collective dimension. Not only because we need to exchange, but especially because we need to be recognized as an amateur. We need that other people recognize our competence. And so the context where the amateur is acting is always collective. The last point that is more important for the talk I present today is the relationship with the space. The amateur builds the space of the palace where he lives. He puts the collection because one important part of the amateur is the collection he builds of objects, of paintings, so on, in a specific part of his house in order to allow some people to access to the space and not other. So there is a very specific structure of the space where it is act. So if we go now, we jump in today, how we can translate these four properties. So what is really changing and what is the same? In my view, most elements are not really changed, because if we take the first one, today, now we have this category of the professional amateurs, and there are people that institutions are looking for. They need this person. Today I will take the example of genealogists, but also in other fields. The distinction of the amateur professional is not based on the level of competencies and on the relationship of the institution. If we have this image as amateur separated, there is a very strong relation. For knowledge, this one of the main elements of the amateur today is the self-learning. We can learn everything on internet. I put the example Wikipedia, but other very famous example are tutorial or YouTube and so on. Today we can reach every kind of knowledge. This is the idea on the internet, and amateurs are people that try to learn themselves. So the only gap is the technological gap. We don't have any gap related to education, capital, cultural capital. As regards the relationship with the artistic practice, usually we tend to distinguish two types of amateurs. The amateurs that is the fan, the person that knows everything of a topic, series, the TV series, comics, and so on. No? The fanzine is the very origin of the amateurs. And then, but we have also the artists. And that today, if we take some example like music, the distinction between professional and artist, amateur is very, very difficult. If we think to artists that are just, we have a lot of examples in Italy more than in France, artists that are just working with social media, to produce their reputation. As regards the relationship of the others, surely this part is even more important with digital technology, because the game of social media is building reputation. So when amateurs are acting, they are diffusing, they are sharing the content to be recognized as artists or as expert of a certain topic. And so I arrived at my last point that we opened the second part of my talk is the space. The specific space of the amateur for me are this participatory platform. Also the platform I presented at the beginning of my talk. So when we analyze this kind of platform, we have to keep in mind that amateurs have all these 5 properties. When they are there, they are not just there for the institution or for the mission they are supposed to do it, but they are there for building their reputation, for building their knowledge, for interacting with the other, and so on. So, but the problem for me when I started to study this topic is that in the literature we have two groups of studies, and they are really separated. On one side, we have studies of what we call participatory culture. And on the other side, we have a more recent literature that I call participatory cultural research. The first one, maybe you are more familiar, anyway, is more than 30 years that exist, is literature about participatory culture, so from Jenkins and so on. This literature analyze participatory platform as a space where the individual can express himself, where we build reputation. They focus especially on social media and commercial platform, study space where you can write, you can share music, you can share your interest. So the idea is that the individual, the amateur, expresses himself, and there is no relation with the institution. Or anyway, in the literature or that focus on this kind of platform, usually the problem where is the institution in relation to the platform is never analyzed. If we jump on the second type of platform, are what we call like the example I presented at the beginning, institutional platform. I put the most famous example, the transcribe Betam platform. I provide just an example of cross-source platform is more various the scenario than this. In another project, I built an observatory of this kind of platform, but I have no time today. Anyway, this is most known example. What we have a space that is built by the institution according to the needs of standardization, according to the format of the knowledge that the institution needs. And then the amateurs go there and they fill the mission that is defined by the institution. this kind of platform that are more recent in cultural sector than in other sectors can be including a more general phenomenon that is citizen science. So the idea that the citizen can contribute to the science, that we don't have the science with a big S, but we have several local science, and everyone can put a contribution to build the science. This is the idea. This is the cover of Nature in 2010 that the title is People Power, with this idea that everyone can contribute to build knowledge. So we have we tend to identify two separate phenomena. On one side, we have amateur platform, participatory culture. People go there for their personal passion. And what is interesting to study usually is we have articles on interaction, profile, how people building profile, and also today more recent literature about recommendation on how contents are classified and so on. On the other side, we have institutional platforms. They are meant to build knowledge, so not to encounter the passion of an individual, and they are meant to generate data that can include it in a standardized database. And so they are meant to build cultural heritage. But I mean, it's not so easy. Unplug my cask. We will see if it's working. I provide.
Hair, hips, heels, ass, fat, lips, real, purse, pool, big deals, bitch, I'm a big deal. Legs, face, eyes, thin, waist, thick, thighs, you. Bitch, all you stop and you pop that tongue, bitch. This whole club is my runway, run, bitch. Y'all 5, 4, 3, 2, I'm a wounded girl. What did that girl just say, girl?
Okay. If I have to categorize this video, this is the first video that was shared on the official account of TikTok. So where we are is an institution. It's looking for participation because it's using kind of you have 248 comments, you have sharing, you have but we are completely the framework of participatory culture. Sorry. Okay. Another example, like more like traditional one. If we take Stevie project, is a project that now today dates 15 years. Was very popular. The idea of folk economies at the beginning of the idea of participation in the sector of cultural heritage. We have also here an institution that takes a model coming from Flickr, coming from social media, and put in the institution. Third example, genealogists. All genealogy websites are a kind of ambiguity between the use of official document reproducing archiving practice for an individual interest. So it's difficult to classify if we use a very separate category. So my point is that today, if we want to study this phenomenon, it catches complexity, it catches all the data that we need to catch to understand what is happening in a participatory platform. We have to reconsider the two terms, participation and platform. As regards participation, the main point is that when we think of participation, if we take a traditional definition like the Oxford English Dictionary definition, the idea is that there is the process of the fact of sharing an action and sentiment, or more specifically, active involvement in a matter or event of one in which outcome directly affect those taking part. So there is the idea, there is a one-way action, like the institution, we take the simple institution, provide something to make people taking part, no? But actually today, participation is always a two-way street. There is always on one side, the crowdsourcing platform is really a very clear example. On one side, we want to make people involved. On the other side, we need people. We need people because we have no time to categorize all elements. Or even I use just the term participatory, but if we use the term collaboratory platform, or no, we can also have community of experts that share. So participation, we need a more complex view of participation. I suggest to use, for example, the idea of organized publics provided by Christopher Kelty in an article of 2012 entitled From Participation to Power, that highlight the role of power, the importance of power in participation. When we have participation, we have different publics. They are quite organized because, especially through digital technology, we are setting some properties. There are something you can do, something you can do. The interface is defining what every act can do. But you arrive with your position, so there is always a struggle of power, also in participatory platform. You have to take into account, because when you study it, you have to have all viewpoints, according to me. As regards the platform, the problem is if we take for 10 years, we have made a big effort, starting from the article of Tartaron Gillespie about the politics of platform. All effort is in defining what is platform. So defining the edges of the platform, the borders. And so we have also, for the fact that today the most common phenomenon is collaborative platform-related collaborative economy. We try to identify a platform with an actor, no? The actor that define the relation of power, the type of service or good. Even we take Uber, there is an actor that define the relation between the different. So my point is that we want to study participation online. We need to take a multi-space perspective. We need to be able to understand where the different actors are acting. And we have to take in consideration all these spaces, all these digital environments. We cannot study crowdsourcing platform, just study what is happening in institutional platform. We have to see where people exchange, if there are parallel groups, if there are social media where there is exchange. We cannot just consider what is happening in the institutional platform. On the other side, if we we want to take the opposite example. If we want to study like a writing platform, I work now on Babelio, which is a French platform where people can write critics on books. Actually, today, a lot of libraries use keywords, user keywords generated on Babelio on the library website. So it's not so easy. We cannot build all this board. We have to. Why this? Because what is very interesting to identify is the boundary object. I will take this very interesting concept of Susan Starr and James Riesemer. Now, the idea of boundary object, it's quite traditional in ESS studies. When you have different actors that we have to dialogue on knowledge or some kind of build together knowledge, they have some boundary objects that help them to communicate. In my view, when we study digital platform, we have boundary spaces. I mean, we have spaces that have specific affordance that allow different actors to be quite more able to communicate than in other spaces. The third point that is that when we want to study this platform, actually the data that are collected are not enough. What is really interesting is the process the data are important, but what is also we need to catch is what I call here the born digital heritage. I mean, the process of building heritage. How people are identifying an element. I mean, if we take annotation is not enough. Is how annotation build, how pair are correcting themselves, how is working, how relation is built, our relation is in the platform, or they are exchanging outside, and we are losing power relations, studying just collecting platform at the end. So now what we do, how we do this is my problem that I'm facing my current research today. So how can we can study this kind of phenomenon? So I will answer with the example I provided at the beginning. This is the platform I studied for 1 year. Mémoire des Hommes is a traditional website. This is capture screen from web archives in 2013, the year when the Minister of Army opened the crowdsourcing platform. This is the interface. Now you have digitalized files, and people are asked to correct some data or select some data from already defined choices in order to fill all this data. Sometimes, most of times, people for filling the data, they need to go on archives, traditional archive, national archives, or local archives, on cemetery to verify data because data are not legible. So I told you in 2018, all files were completed. One you see on your right, 1,600,000 annotation. So how that it happened? It happened because there was a person that was unemployed. This is something that is important also to take in account, that built several space on social media to motivate people in completing these files. I will not provide a lot of, anyway, very quickly. In 2013, he launched an hashtag on Twitter and asked people to fill at least a file a day. And he launched like a challenge. He made classification every month, or people they annotate more. Then there was also a Facebook page because he understood that not all people was on Twitter. So there was some public that was not able to participate, and so on. So my point is that if you, I built a very complex methodology to have all this data, all contribution on all this space. Twitter works as a boundary spaces. Why? Because in Twitter, the webmaster of the institutional website was able to exchange with amateurs and to make some change at the database. At the same time, amateurs on the Twitter and on Facebook could publish some content that was not useful for the institution, was not used to include in the standard. So from the methodological viewpoint, what I have done, I discovered this at the end, so it was kind of complicated. So I used web archive, but it was not so useful. So I had the chance to recuperate some personal collection of tweets, and also I could collect data from Facebook. What we have is, and then I have a lot of interviews because this is so. This is the interface of the institutional site, quite classic. This is the type of content you have on Facebook. People put the photo of documents. They put a photo of the cemetery, the photo of person. What is written under the photo? Derrière chaque fiche un homme. Behind each files a man. I mean, the goal of the amateurs is not to filling the institutional database. it's not they don't care, but it's not the main goal. The main goal is discover what happened to their relatives, or to show they are very expert as the genealogist, or is to show the personal story of the people. If you read the text, in the text you know which was the job of the person, how who was dead, because according to the French law, you cannot archive the reason of death of a person. So they cannot put this information in institutional database. It's the same on Twitter. You have a standard structure of the tweet. So you could archive all tweets. You could build a database from tweets because they use the same, all contributors, they use the same structure, hashtag, name, work, place, and so on. But you have also documents. They provide you documents that cannot provide an institutional platform. So my point is that we really need, if you want to understand the participation related to cultural heritage, and not just to have the data that at the end of the participation, we need to have a methodological bricolage. We need to combine different methods. We need to keep the database separated. I mean, it's impossible. We cannot ask the institution to collect this. It's not the mission. But as a researcher, we want to understand this. Even as an institution, we want to understand what is happening around our cross-sourcing platform. We have to be able to trace the process of building heritage and to understand the relationship between actors, because this is part of the born digital heritage. This is built in this kind of platform. Okay. I will conclude with a last example. We have a second choice. I tried this second, considering the first. We can try to build from the beginning multi-space platform. No, we want to collect. We want to build participation. We want to have some cross-sourcing. We can try to have different spaces that fit for the needs of different amateurs that are suitable to collect different kinds of data. So I will present very quickly a project I built with a colleague, Sarah Jensburg. She is historian. We launched a challenge in April 2012 for collecting image of messages in the public space during the lockdown. We wanted to have an idea of what was happening outside our houses when we were in lockdown. Anyway, I have not time to present, but I want to present the methodology. So we built a traditional institutional platform. No? I mean, it was a cross-sourcing platform based on cartography, but also we provide hashtags, we have a parallel hashtag on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We also have the chance, the INA, the French Institute of Audiovisual, access to collect the activity related to hashtag on Twitter. And what is happened? That we expected that all people will participate on Instagram, because our idea was on Twitter. Our idea that they were more suitable for photo, but actually most of people were on Facebook, because what they wanted was to share with people. We build a link, a social link during lockdown. We have this is just to have an idea of the participation just on Facebook. We have 3,000 photos. We have a participation, especially from France and Italy. Anyway, so what we have done is that at the end, we carry out the database. I mean, at the end, we built a NoMaker where we are putting all photos together and we are adding metadata to the photo. This database, if you are interested, is accessible. You can, all data are available to whoever you want to work on it. So we have a very, very complex file that we build as a research after. But allow to people to contribute as they wanted to contribute, and then we add our metadata at the end. Then you can, okay, just to have a small idea what we have in our database, we can trace the different kind of contribution. In France, was very different, France and Italy. Now, in France, people wanted to go outside. We have a lot of contribution. In Italy, people were really afraid to go outside. Anyway, you have, okay, this is Italy. Now you see, you have, you know very well, the Arcobaleno and so on. Anyway, you can trust. If you want, I can go back. My point, okay, this is France today because we are more locked down than you. As a conclusion, what I want to share with you is the interest for me of have a diachronic perspective on cultural participatory platform, making the link from the amateur of the 17th, 18th century and today for understanding which are the needs of the amateur, needs that have to take in account that cannot be correspond to the institutional needs. So when we are studying participation in cultural heritage, in digital spaces, we need a multi-space perspective to understand where people are acting, which is the process that allows to build a digital-born heritage collection. The problem is that from the methodological viewpoint, it is quite impossible to have a standardized protocol for apply this kind of theoretical framework. And so we need a kind of bricolage of different methodologies. And today I have still more challenges than answer to provide you. Anyway, I finish. I'm here for your question.
Thank you very much indeed, Marta, for this splendid presentation and introduction of these extremely functional and useful categories, and for proposing the bricolage of methodologies and clarifying under a historical or diachronic perspective such super common terms like participation and platform. So I'm very much aware of what we should be talking about actually. So thank you very much. I think I'm sure there will be lots of questions. So everyone is invited to post, type your question into the chat, or just write your name that you would like to ask a question, and then I can give you room for asking your question. Okay, here's the chat. I try to follow your messages here. Otherwise, please shout if I oversee something. I suppose you are very busy with requests for collaboration of cultural heritage institutions and research institutions. So I'm tempted to contact you as well. The expertise that is needed in so many projects, or expected in nowadays. So.
Yeah, the most interesting fact is that recently the city of Nantes, we are in France, we can have PhD theses that are funded also by public enterprise, public sector. So we are building a project of thesis about their interest, how they can incorporate social media in the crowdsourcing platform. So it kind of interesting that it's a collective, a city that has this kind of, I think something is changing. So it's very encouraging.
So here comes our first question from Seoul, if I'm pronouncing correctly. If you want to ask your question yourself, Seoul Kilang.
Hi, I'm
there you are.
Sophie.
Yeah, please.
Thank you for your presentation today. So I was wondering if there were any technical difficulties when building the database for Windows lockdown projects. For example, like images, size of the images could be really large because you collected a lot of images from many users, or any kind of technical data like this.
Yeah, we have a lot of challenges. The first one was related to privacy, management of personal data, and also data right related to photos. This was first. So we have people that are posting are accepting a chart, providing us image. And then we have all this metadata because we want to use the information without using the photo, because we don't know if we really can keep the photo. Then from the technical point of view, we have a lot of manual work because we have people filling the database, transcribing the text. So this is a challenge. The big challenge is today now. At the beginning, we have an incredible participation with very few work of animation. This was easy, but now we have a lot of work, and we also as always, when we are too close of something we study, it's difficult to identify the good question for our database. Let's say like this.
Thank you.
Oh, Laura Castro has a question on the definition of cultural heritage. Do you want to elaborate on this, maybe, Laura?
Yes, thank you so much. Well, you defined at the beginning of your intervention, you defined platforms and participation. And then witnessing your last project, the last one you presented, concerning the lockdown and what people were doing and collecting and so on, how would you define cultural heritage according to your interests and within your research project? I know it is a broad question, but...
No, I understand. Is a good point, because when we present this project, we speak about collective memory and non-cultural heritage, actually. So the example is a methodological example, but is a very good point. Is not really related to cultural heritage, because the only definition that we can just provide two definitions of cultural heritage, in my view. One definition is that we use the definition that is provided by institution. I mean, cultural heritage is what UNESCO defines as what we leave for the future generation. Or the other possible definition that we have for cultural heritage is what people recognize as their cultural heritage. I think we have two kinds of definition. In the case of Windows in lockdown, we don't have yet, in my view, a cultural heritage. We have a collective memory. And we are building a project. We are looking for funding today because we have a big, there are several collections ongoing. So French institutions, they are really wondering what they have to do with all these elements. We have several institutions that are interested in archiving our collection. So we want to understand participants, what they want, what they are expecting. Yes, I don't know if it was your point. I think that the Windows lockdown in the actual form is not a platform archiving cultural heritage, is a platform archiving collective memory.
Okay, thank you.
Antonella Capalbi.
Okay, thank you. Maybe my question is not exactly about the focus of the presentation, because my research is about the impact of platforms on the audiovisual industry. And I'm trying to analyze this field, the impact of participation too. And I consider so interesting this distinction in literature between institutional platform and amateur platform. Do you think that we can find this distinction too in the audiovisual field? For example, Netflix could be considered an institutional platform and, for example, Mubi, an amateur platform?
Okay, yeah, it depends how you define institution. So here, when we can say that Netflix is an institution in the field of audiovisual, but here with the term institution, I really use a kind of Weberian definition of the institution related to the state. So I think that there are studies, I don't know, I know studies in the French literature today. They are working on the relationship between Netflix and also between cinema and some platform in France. The most important is Sens Critique, is the name, because they are a kind of promotion relation. No? They can say this, like this film is appreciated by amateurs of Sens Critique, something like this. So if we take this example in account, yes, you have kind of relation like institution and amateurs, but Netflix doesn't have a challenge of building knowledge, in my view. This is what is make it very different.
Okay, thank you.
There's a question, similar direction by Francesca Benetti. By the way, you can also activate your video, so that doesn't have an impact on the quality of the transmission here. So I think it's easier for Marta to communicate with actual persons. But I mean, you're not obliged. Yeah, everyone can hide. And so, sorry, Francesca. So, yeah.
Oh no, don't worry. It's just there's a sort of delay in my connection, so I thought you stopped talking. I'm sorry, apologies. Thanks for this interesting presentation. I was wondering, I mean, you talked mostly about institutional platforms, or anyway, institutions, well, platforms that started from institutional initiatives. But there are also platforms, or for example, Facebook groups, informal Facebook groups that have been built more bottom up, like from the public initiatives. For you talked about genealogies and so on. There are lots of communities like such these. Do you know an example where institutions collaborated actively with already existing platforms, or already existing groups or projects like these, started from the public, I mean?
But you cite the example of genealogists. This is, I think, is the most known example. Archive, public archive, local or national level, are really in strong connection with group of genealogists that they're expressing themselves usually still in forum before their Facebook page. So yes, we have several examples. I think the problem now, I have another fieldwork to understand. When I'm working on we are doing a survey with the user of a platform called GeneaNet, of genealogists, for understanding if the people that are participating in this informal group, they share in a cultural heritage motivation. I don't know how to call this. I mean, yes, you have this informal platform, you have this kind of relationship, kind of informal. We can build something on it, something more stable, something, or is impossible because they are just, they have a very different motivation, so they are contributing to the institutional knowledge, but actually they are doing just when these encounters their individual interest. Yeah. But yes, you have several examples.
Any other questions? So I'm very much interested in this opposition or the opposition between that you made between participatory culture and participatory culture research. So, and who defines then what is actually cultural heritage? So who has the power to say this is worth to be conserved or saved in whatever archive or not? So do you have more clues to clarify this partly contradictory approach to what cultural heritage actually is, or any criteria for defining? So I mean the one you mentioned already. So, but is there a way to bring this together?
The problem is, okay, my reflection is also related to institutional movement we have in France in the last 2 years. The French Ministry of Culture started a project called Citizen Science and Participatory Cultural Research. This is why the name Participatory Cultural Research, because it's translation of this we have in France. This movement is coordinated by the National Museum of National History, that in France is an academic institution. No, is an institution is like a university. No, they have a master, they have so, and they are a leading institution in citizen science. And the task they had was to building a network of people that should exchange for defining what is this participatory culture research. And I participated for 2 years. I still participating, and we were not able to agree because, in their view, in a view coming from citizen science, we need to produce scientific knowledge. I mean, participation in the framework of the institutional platform, in the framework of what they call participatory research, should produce academic knowledge, or at least an academic or scientific institution should be involved in order to guarantee the quality of the protocol. So to provide you an example, we have a never-ending discussion on Wikipedia, for example. No, Wikipedia for them is cannot be included in a participatory research because there is no generated according to scientific standards, and also because it's not supposed to produce new knowledge. No? Wikipedia is supposed to just publish sources already. I provide several examples. I have made several articles on this that show that today Wikipedia is used in institutional projects for building new knowledge or documenting new knowledge, for example, on gender studies, on intangible cultural heritage. So in this context, Wikipedia is used by the institution. It's just a cultural institution. There is no university usually, no? There is no academic factor. But for me, it's really participatory research. So the problem in this definition today, the encounter is impossible until we have a very strong interpretation of what is scientific knowledge. What if in the database, this is really a very key point, because in a traditional database, we have standards, we have metadata, we have Dublin Core, we have library, ontology, and so on. So if we want to obtain all this from participatory culture, we cannot, this is sure. So this is why they don't communicate the two universe today for me.
Elisa, you would like to have pose a question. Are you there?
Yeah, congratulations for your presentation. I'm wondering if both participations and platforms practice are now really changing in relation to the COVID emergency. I mean, if you think that people are more motivated in building heritage, if their awareness and their needs are changing, and if they are more collaborative, and if their main goal is different from the past. is more than collective memory, find their identity and their history. So do you think that we are going a step further towards a new challenge, a new way of thinking, and which one? Thank you.
Yeah, the new challenge. Yeah, if participation is increasing, the new challenge will be the status, how we define the work. I mean, I didn't mention this in my talk, but next challenge is the question of digital labor or the recognition of if there is a positive movement where people want to interact more, collaborate more, we will have in the cultural sector the same dynamics that we have in collaborative economy. And we have already in some fields, because, for example, we have some crowdsourcing platform in their related to archives. They ask people to encode in TI, in XML. People are following tutorials in order to very advanced tutorial. I was not able to follow once. So yes, people contribute more. We have a very positive something new we can build on this, but we have several new challenges to take into account, because it's not because it's culture that we are very good, everyone is good and gentle, but we can have digital labor also in cultural sector.
David Rosenthal, you have a comment?
No, I don't. I was just responding to something that one of the other people in the audience was asking about collaborations with institutions from public platforms. And I just thought a good example of that might be HistoryPin, which is essentially a public platform where anybody can put material up, geolocated material, but it also has performed a number of collaborations with various institutions. In its history. At the moment, it's undergoing a bit of a refurb, so it's web only at the moment. It used to be also on a mobile app, so it's undergoing a bit of something new. And I just thought that might be a nice example, or I don't know, maybe you don't think that's a particularly good example of institutional public collaboration on a platform. Maybe I'll put that as a question. Is that a good example of a collaborative public institutional forum?
For me, yes. I mean, everyone, the way we can change perspective if we take example where we are not sure we are good example. I think it's a good example. I mean, what is difficult to understand, what ask a lot of work, is to, because I'm always, when there is a lot of participation, I'm really 100% sure that there are some institutions that are interested in the content is generated in space, in digital space. The difficulty is to identify which is this institution that maybe is already using the content. Yeah, another example. So this is a good example. I really interested in exploring this because I don't know, but providing another very different example. Yeah, today related also to the question we had before about audiovisual. There is a platform. It's called Indax. Indax is a platform where people put comics of Disney. I mean, they share all Disney with a lot of metadata. And what is really interesting, I discover I have a student working in Disney in France. Actually, this database is more complete than the database as Disney. So documentalists in Disney, when they have to provide to build, the collection you find in them. Per the month Paperino and collection, they are using this amateur platform. And in this amateur platform, copyright is not respected because they are publishing all image, but there is a synergy because that finally Disney allowed this amateur platform that produce knowledge in an informal way, use it for an industrial creative industry. So we have to leave our eyes really open to see these different synergies that we and then try to understand it.
Martina Bürgermeister, where are
Thank
you?
Hi. Yeah, I wanted to ask if you have studied also the aspect of gamification, and I wanted to know if this is really necessary or just within a special user group or age. Do you have some experience in that?
Yes, okay, gamification, I didn't mention before, but for the example, one day on Solder was really the base. I mean, there was a challenge, even if there was not a specific game, the spirit of gamification was working. What we have a lot now is what we call the game with a goal. I don't know if you're familiar with this category. This is really studied in this kind of field. The game with a goal is when you use gamification, but you explain the people why they are playing. I mean, the game is not related to the production of knowledge, so it's not like citizen science. I mean, for example, you have a game with a goal for a linguistic platform, for recognizing some variancy in words related to dialects. So the game can be very, very stupid. You click and then you make points, but well, to access to the game, you have to read why researchers have built this game. This is kind of gamification, it's kind of developing this field. So you use gamification, but in order to avoid kind of digital labor or something like this, you explain why people are gaming. When the people are playing, they don't know what they are producing, what they are generating. But at the beginning, you explain this. I share this category, then I think it kind of complicates the borders, but yes, I work a little on this category of gamification.
Thank you.
There are many thank yous and congratulations in the chat for your presentation. We have room for another question, or if you, Marta, if you have a question to the wisdom of the crowd present here. I mean, it's a participatory seminar here.
But my question is always the same. I can share with you because I forgot to put in a slide. I have a platform. As I told you, I have an observatory that I try to build of all these initiatives. And if you know some platform, you can share here or even with an email, or I have a form we provide. I can share with you this. Even in later today. Okay, you can also access to the observatory if you are interested. Okay, I share this with you. Sorry, there is a lot of French, but you know, in France you have to use French. They are not so familiar with the English, so. Yeah. Don't hesitate if you think that you can know some case study or that you participate in some community that you think can be interesting. And also, if you want to propose a case study, because I have a collective project, I have a postdoc, we are carrying out a lot of fieldworks in this phase. So we are open also to proposal of new fieldwork.
That's very useful indeed. I will use it in my seminar. But I mean, there are so many projects. Do you select specific projects or?
Okay, we have a participatory approach. So, is a collective project. So we have a first group of platforms identified with my colleagues. Then if you go on the website, you have a form you can suggest. You are just a line, suggest a platform. A lot of people have suggested some platform. And then so we have almost 100 platform. And the second phase, we wrote everyone. And we wrote to all these people having this project. You will see are very, very different, really commercial one also. And we are building this observatory. We define your platforms with this file if you want some change. And then we are looking for case study. Do you want to be a case study of our research? We can define together the research protocol. And now we have a good amount of answers. So we have several case studies carry on today. Yeah, I think at some point we have to stop. But for the moment, we can manage because one specific characteristic of the kind of project is a kind of long time. I mean, it's not... I mean, it takes some time for them to ask, take some time to build the protocol, and we have very different kind of protocol. We can do interviews survey, we can have log analysis, we can have comment textual analysis. It's very different. What is good is that we have very different actor answering, not just institution. So this is very good.
Thank you very much. So if there are no further questions, I thank you once again very much, Marta, for this wonderful presentation, for sharing all this with our participants here. Our next seminar will take place in 2 weeks on advanced imaging to support digital humanities by Michael Toth. You can register via the same channels, and I hope to see you back in 2 weeks. Yeah, everyone have a good evening, or wherever you are, a good morning.
Thank you again for your attention also.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.